Part 1, The Incident. This ghetto trash thinks they can fly first class. Not on my watch. Karen Peterson's whispered words to her colleague weren't meant to be overheard, but they carried just far enough for Olivia Jackson to catch them as she approached the gate. Olivia felt the words like a physical blow, her stomach tightening as the familiar sting of prejudice hit her yet again. She kept her expression neutral, a skill perfected through years of being the only black girl in advanced science competitions. But her hand instinctively tightened around the handle of her carry-on. Terminal 5 at JFK International Airport hummed with the controlled case of a Thursday afternoon. The air was a familiar cocktail of recycled oxygen, overpriced coffee, and the subtle perfume of anxiety that clung to travelers rushing between gates. For 16-year-old twins Olivia and Elijah Jackson, this was just another waypoint in lives already marked by extraordinary achievement. Olivia adjusted her navy blazer over a crisp white button-down, her natural hair styled in an elegant crown of braids that framed her face. Her twin brother Elijah stood beside her in charcoal slacks and a matching blazer over a light blue Oxford shirt, his close-cropped hair precisely edged. They looked every bit the accomplished young scientists they were, poised, confident, and completely unaware of the humiliation that awaited them at Gate 27. Their matching carry-on luggage bore the embossed insignia of MIT, where they'd been accepted as early admission students for the following fall. Inside Olivia's bag was a sleek titanium presentation case containing the prototype for their revolutionary water filtration system that used sonic resonance to remove microplastics and heavy metals with 98.7% efficiency, technology that had earned them an invitation to present at the International Youth Innovation Summit in London. "You have the presentation backup on your tablet, right?" Elijah asked, double-checking as he always did before flights. Their scientific partnership worked because of their complementary natures, Olivia's brilliant theoretical physics balanced by Elijah's meticulous engineering precision. "Of course," Olivia replied, patting her leather messenger bag. "And the cloud backup, and the backup of the backup. We're presenting at 9 a.m. London time tomorrow, which gives us plenty of margin if there's any delay." Little did they know just how significant that delay would become. The departures board overhead displayed their flight information in bright blue letters. Atlantic Skyways Flight 867 to London, Heathrow boarding in 53 minutes, Gate 27. A small digital clock below read 2:42 p.m. They approached the priority boarding line. First-class tickets and passports held in the leather portfolio their father had given them for their 16th birthday. The portfolio was embossed with the NASA insignia, a small reminder of their heritage. "I still can't believe Dad convinced the foundation to spring for first class," Elijah whispered. "He said something about maximizing cognitive function through adequate rest before high-stakes presentations." Olivia smiled. "Just Dad being Dad." Karen Peterson stood behind the gate podium with the rigid posture of someone who found meaning in minor authority. At 47, she'd been with Atlantic Skyways for 18 years. Her career stalled in the middle management of airport operations. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun that seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. Her Atlantic Skyways blazer bore 3 service pins and a name tag that read K. Peterson, Senior Gate Agent, serving with pride, since 2007. What wasn't visible on that name tag was Karen's proud internal record, 73% more security interventions with passengers of color than with white passengers. In her performance reviews, she was consistently praised for her vigilance and unwavering commitment to security protocols, corporate euphemisms that validated her discriminatory instincts. Just last month, she had prevented a Nigerian medical doctor from boarding by questioning his credentials until he missed his flight. The airline had quietly settled his complaint with frequent flyer miles and a form letter apology. As Olivia and Elijah approached, Karen's eyes performed a familiar calculation, one that had nothing to do with their tickets and everything to do with their skin color. "Next passenger," she called, her customer service smile evaporating as the twins stepped forward. Elijah placed their leather portfolio on the counter. "Good afternoon, Jackson, Olivia, and Elijah. First class to London Heathrow." Karen's fingers moved with deliberate slowness as she reached for their documentation. She opened the portfolio and removed their passports, holding the first one up to the light as though she expected to find a watermark forgery. "These are diplomatic science passports," Olivia offered helpfully. "They were issued by the State Department for our international research presentations." The Diplomatic Science Passport Program was a little-known initiative for exceptional young scientists representing American innovation abroad. The burgundy covers were nearly identical to standard passports but included additional endorsements for scientific materials, transport, and expedited customs procedures. Karen's eyes narrowed. I've never seen this type of passport before. How old did you say you were? We're 16, Elijah answered. The Diplomatic Science Passport Program is administered through— I don't need a history lesson, Karen interrupted, turning the passport over in her hands. This doesn't look right to me. The laminate seems irregular. Behind them, a line was forming. A white businessman in his 50s checked his watch impatiently. An older couple whispered to each other, stealing glances at the teens. There's nothing irregular about our documentation, Olivia said calmly, channeling the composed precision her father had taught them for moments exactly like this. Those passports have been used for international travel 6 times in the past year without incident. Karen ignored her, turning to her computer terminal and typing with exaggerated effort. I'm also showing an unusual situation with these tickets. First-class bookings for minors without accompanying adults raise automatic security flags in our system. This was a lie. Atlantic Skyway's policy clearly stated that passengers 16 and older were permitted to travel unaccompanied in any cabin class without special documentation. That's not accurate, Elijah said, his voice level but firm. Atlantic Skyway's policy states that passengers 16 and older are considered adults for travel purposes. We've flown Atlantic Skyway's first class 3 times this year alone. Karen's face hardened at being challenged. Young man, I've been working for this airline for 18 years. I think I know our policies better than you do. The tension was escalating. Other passengers were watching now, some with discomfort, others with impatience, a few with the unmistakable anticipation of witnessing conflict that wouldn't affect them personally. Is there a problem here? A young white woman with pink streaked hair and multiple ear piercings had stepped out of line, phone already in hand. This was Mackenzie Taylor, a 24-year-old social media content creator with a modest following of 37,000 subscribers across platforms. Her content usually focused on travel hacks and budget adventures, but she was about to inadvertently capture something far more significant. Nothing that concerns you, Karen said sharply. This is a security matter. Mackenzie didn't move, and her phone remained up, the red recording light now visible. I'm just documenting what appears to be an unusual security procedure, she replied calmly, her years of dealing with hostile authorities during her travels evident in her steady tone. I need to speak with your supervisor, Olivia said, her voice still remarkably calm. There seems to be a misunderstanding about our documentation. There's no misunderstanding, Karen replied, her voice rising to ensure nearby passengers could hear. I have concerns about the authenticity of these documents and the legitimacy of these bookings. The accusation hung in the air. Fraud. Criminality. The implication was clear. These young black travelers couldn't possibly belong in first class legitimately. Have you ever stood in a public space and been told you don't belong there? Have you ever had your identity questioned simply because you didn't fit someone's expectation of who should occupy a certain seat, a certain neighborhood, a certain position? The humiliation burns hotter because of the audience, the witnesses who say nothing, who look away, who secretly wonder if maybe, just maybe, the authority figure is right about you. Officer Rodriguez, Karen called, waving over a security officer who had been standing nearby. Officer Miguel Rodriguez, a stocky man in his mid-30s with a meticulously groomed mustache, approached with the measured pace of someone not yet convinced there was a situation requiring his attention. What's the problem? Karen, he asked, deliberately using her first name to de-escalate whatever was happening. I have concerns about these passengers' documentation, Karen said, lowering her voice to a pseudo-professional register. The passports appear irregular, and the ticketing situation doesn't align with our security protocols. Rodriguez looked at the twins, taking in their professional attire and composed demeanor, then at the documentation on the counter. His expression suggested he was already categorizing this as another of Karen's situations. May I see the documents in question? He asked. Karen handed him the passports with the air of someone presenting evidence at a trial. Rodriguez opened them, examining the pages with practiced efficiency. These appear to be diplomatic science passports. he noted. Not common, but definitely legitimate government-issued documents. But the laminate, Karen began. Standard for this type of document, Rodriguez interrupted. And their first-class tickets. That's where the irregularity is most concerning, Karen insisted. It's highly unusual for passengers of their profondum to be in our premium cabin unaccompanied. There it was. The mask had slipped. Their profile, 3 syllables that contain volumes of prejudice. Mackenzie's phone captured every word, every microaggression, every moment of this escalating situation. The red recording light seemed to pulse more intensely, like a digital heartbeat measuring the mounting tension. Her live stream had already attracted 2,300 viewers, the comment section flooding with reactions. OMG, is this racial profiling happening live? Those kids look more professional than half the adults at the gate. Atlantic Skyways, you better address this now. Wait, aren't these the teen scientists from that TED Talk, the water filtration inventors? The number of viewers jumped to 4,600, then 7,200 in the span of 2 minutes as the algorithm recognized the rapidly growing engagement. Karen ignored Mackenzie, turning back to Rodriguez. I'm simply following security protocols for unusual booking patterns. 2 minors, first class, international travel. It triggers automatic reviews. We're 16, Elijah repeated, frustration finally edging into his voice. We're presenting at the International Youth Innovation Summit in London tomorrow morning. Our father, Dr. Darius Jackson, booked these tickets through the MIT Science Foundation account. At the mention of their father's name, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Karen's face, but she quickly recovered her righteousness. Anyone can claim a connection to anyone. Without verification, then let us call our father, Olivia suggested reasonably, reaching for her phone. No, Karen said sharply. I need you to surrender your phones until we've resolved this security concern. This demand was completely outside protocol, but it accomplished Karen's goal, cutting the twins off from potential support. The situation was drawing more attention now. Passengers were openly staring. Several had phones out, recording. The businessman who had been impatient earlier now looked uncomfortable, as though suddenly realizing he was witnessing something darker than a routine security check. Elijah kept his voice steady. Officer Rodriguez, is it Atlantic Skyways policy to confiscate phones during document verification? Rodriguez hesitated. No, that's not standard procedure. Then we'll keep our phones, Olivia said firmly. And I'm calling our father now. As she reached for her phone, a new figure approached the gate. Captain William Pearson, the pilot for Flight 867, strode toward them with the confident gait of someone accustomed to respect. At 58, his silver-streaked hair and crisp uniform projected unquestionable authority. The 4 stripes on his epaulets gleamed under the terminal lights. Ms. Peterson, I was informed there's a security issue at my gate, he said, barely glancing at the twins. Captain Pearson, Karen said, her voice transforming into one of professional deference. I have concerns about these passengers' documentation and ticketing situation. The captain gave Olivia and Elijah a cursory look, his assessment taking less than 2 seconds before turning back to Karen. What specifically is the concern? Potentially fraudulent documentation, unusual booking pattern, possible attempt to circumvent security protocols. Karen rattled off, gaining confidence with each accusation. Captain Pearson nodded gravely. As pilot in command, passenger safety is my primary responsibility. If there are documentation concerns, we need to resolve them before boarding. That's what I've been trying to do, Karen said, shooting a vindicated look at the twins. Olivia's fingers moved swiftly across her phone screen, typing a text message rather than calling. Dad, they won't let us board. Gate 27, Atlantic Skyways. They said our tickets are fake. Captain, Elijah attempted, our documentation is completely legitimate. We're speakers at... Young man, Pearson interrupted. This will go much more smoothly if you cooperate with the security procedures. What security procedures? Olivia asked pointedly. No one has specified which actual protocols we're supposedly violating. The captain's jaw tightened at being challenged. Mrs. Peterson has identified concerns, and as the gate authority, her assessment requires proper investigation before boarding. Karen straightened, bolstered by the captain's support. For security reasons, I cannot allow you to board this flight. Her voice carried the finality of someone who believed they had won. On what grounds? Elijah demanded, his composure finally cracking. You haven't cited a single valid reason. I don't have to explain myself to you, Karen said coldly. Now please step aside so legitimate passengers can board. Legitimate passengers. There it was again. The implication that Olivia and Elijah were somehow illegitimate, fraudulent, not belonging in the space they had every right to occupy. Officer Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable but said nothing, caught between professional obligation and personal discomfort with what was unfolding. This is discrimination, Olivia stated clearly, making sure her voice carried. And it's being recorded from multiple angles. Mackenzie's live stream counter now showed 14,700 viewers and climbing rapidly. 3 other passengers had phones out, capturing the scene from different perspectives. Comments were flooding in by the hundreds per second. NASA, your scientist kids are being profiled at JFK. Isn't their dad that propulsion engineer who saved the space station? These kids invented that water filter system that's saving lives in Africa. Atlantic Skyways, you're about to lose millions over this. 2:52 p.m., 43 minutes until scheduled departure. The power dynamic at Gate 27 was about to undergo a seismic shift. Step aside, Captain Pearson ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Security will escort you from the gate area if necessary. With as much dignity as they could muster, Olivia and Elijah moved away from the counter, their passports and tickets still in Karen's possession. They stood at the edge of the gate area, 16-year-old scientists who had presented to NASA officials and United Nations ambassadors, now treated like criminals in front of a growing audience of travelers. I'll try Dad again, Olivia whispered to her brother. He'll fix this. Elijah nodded, his eyes never leaving Captain Pearson and Karen, who were now huddled in conversation behind the counter, occasionally glancing at the twins as if they might attempt to storm the jetway. This is just the beginning of a story that will change how an entire industry operates. What these airline employees don't realize is that in exactly 46 minutes, everything they think they know about power and authority will be completely rewritten. Part 2, the father arrives. What do you mean they won't let you board? Dr. Darius Jackson's voice echoed through his NASA office, causing several heads to turn in the open workspace beyond his glass door. The text from Olivia had hit him like a physical blow. He stared at his phone, reading the message again. Dad, they won't let us board. Gate 27, Atlantic Skyways. They said our tickets are fake. Dr. Jackson set down the quantum propulsion simulation he'd been reviewing and immediately dialed Olivia's number. When she didn't answer, he tried Elijah. Nothing. His pulse quickened. His children always answered his calls. Dr. Darius Jackson was not a man accustomed to panic. As director of advanced propulsion systems at NASA, he routinely made decisions that affected billion-dollar projects and potentially the future of human space exploration. But in this moment, all of that faded to background noise. His children needed him. Dr. Martinez, he called to his colleague through the open door. I have an emergency situation with Olivia and Elijah at JFK. I need to leave immediately. Sophia Martinez looked up from her computer, instantly alert at the tension in her colleague's voice. What's happened? Some issue at the Atlantic Skyways gate. They're being denied boarding. He was already gathering his things, shutting down his computer with hasty keystrokes. That makes no sense. Martinez frowned. Their documentation is impeccable. They've traveled internationally 6 times this year alone. Exactly. The single word contained volumes of understanding between the colleagues. Both knew what documentation issues often meant for travelers of color. 3:07 p.m., 28 minutes until scheduled departure. The countdown had begun. Take your NASA jacket, Dr. Martinez suggested quietly. The official one with the mission patches. Dr. Bywater Jackson paused, then nodded grimly. He understood exactly what she was saying. Sometimes, visibility was necessary. Sometimes, credentials needed to be unmistakable. He pulled the navy blue jacket from his office closet. The NASA insignia was embroidered prominently on the chest, with mission patches decorating both sleeves. Mars Sample Return, Artemis Lunar Program, Europa Clipper. His name was stitched above the logo Dr. Darius Jackson, Ph.D., Director, advanced propulsion systems. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. As he strode toward the elevator, Dr. Jackson pulled out his phone again and dialed Atlantic Skyway's executive offices. He had consulted for their engineering division on engine efficiency protocols just last year, a connection that should have yielded immediate response. Instead, he got a receptionist who promised someone would get back to him as soon as possible. Not acceptable. In the car, he tried the airline's customer service line while navigating through midday traffic. After 3 minutes of automated menu options, he was placed on hold. The estimated wait time, 47 minutes. Also not acceptable. He ended the call and switched to hands-free as he accelerated onto the highway. Call Robert Thompson, he instructed his vehicle's system. Robert Thompson was his attorney, a Harvard-educated specialist in civil rights law who had become a personal friend over years of shared community advocacy work. Darius, Thompson answered on the second ring. What can I do for you? My children are being denied boarding at JFK, Atlantic Skyways, Gate 27, claim documentation issues. Thompson didn't waste time with expressions of surprise or outrage. Are they recording marathon? Unknown. They're not answering calls. I'm pulling up Atlantic Skyway's passenger rights documentation now, Thompson said, keyboard clicks audible in the background. Their own policy states 16-year-old passengers are considered adults for travel purposes. No special documentation required. I know that, Dr. Jackson said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he changed lanes. They have diplomatic science passports. State Department issued. Even better, Thompson replied. Are you on your way to the airport? ETA 16 minutes if traffic holds. I'll keep trying to reach someone at Atlantic Skyway's executive offices. Document everything when you arrive. No threats, no raised voices, just facts. Understood. 3:17 p.m., 18 minutes until final boarding. The clock was ticking. As Dr. Jackson navigated through traffic, his NASA credentials prominently displayed on his dashboard for the benefit of any police officer who might otherwise question his speed. The social media firestorms was already beginning. Mackenzie Taylor's live stream had surpassed 47,000 viewers. The hashtag Atlantic Skyways shame was trending nationally. Comments poured in by the thousands, many from people who recognized the Jackson twins from their TED Talk on water purification technology that had gone viral 6 months earlier. In the Atlantic Skyways Operations Center, alerts were beginning to ping on multiple monitors. Social media tracking algorithms had flagged an emerging PR situation. Marketing analysts watched with growing alarm as negative sentiment about the airline spiked 341% in under 20 minutes. But in the executive offices, no one had yet grasped the magnitude of what was happening at Gate 27. No one understood that Dr. Darius Jackson, holder of 3 PhDs, owner of 27 patents, designer of engine systems currently used in Atlantic Skyway's own fleet, was 18 minutes away from their terminal. With a righteous fury that would reshape their entire corporate structure. At JFK, Olivia and Elijah stood at the edge of the gate area, phones in hand, watching as first-class passengers began the boarding process. Each glanced at the twins with varying expressions, curiosity, discomfort, occasional sympathy, and in some cases, the smug satisfaction of people who believed the system worked correctly by excluding those who didn't belong. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning priority boarding for Atlantic Skyways Flight 867 to London Heathrow, Karen announced into her microphone, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the twins. Please have your boarding passes and identification ready. Dad will be here, Olivia whispered to her brother. He always fixes things. Elijah nodded, but doubt had begun to creep in. Even their father, with all his accomplishments and connections, might not arrive in time to prevent the doors from closing on their opportunity to present at the summit. Mackenzie had positioned herself near the twins, her live stream continuing to attract viewers. I'm here at JFK, where 2 teenage passengers have been denied boarding despite having valid tickets and passports. She narrated quietly. The gate agent has provided no legitimate reason for the denial. The comment section was becoming increasingly outraged. This is textbook discrimination. Atlantic Skyways, this is disgraceful. Someone tagged their dad. He's the NASA scientist, right? The quantum propulsion guy. That gate agent needs to be fired immediately. The captain is just as guilty, using his authority to back up racism. 3:28 p.m., 7 minutes before the scheduled end of boarding. The terminal doors slid open. Dr. Darius Jackson entered, his NASA jacket immediately drawing attention. At 6'2", with the athletic build of someone who still ran 5 miles daily despite a demanding schedule. He cut an imposing figure. His closely cropped beard was beginning to show signs of gray, but his eyes were sharp and focused as they scanned the terminal. Several travelers recognized him immediately. Dr. Jackson was not a household name, but within scientific and engineering circles, he was something of a celebrity. His TED Talk on the future of propulsion systems had over 12 million views. His research had transformed aerospace engineering over the past decade. "Dad," Olivia called, spotting him first. Dr. Jackson moved with purpose, closing the distance to Gate 27 in long strides. As he approached, the NASA insignia on his jacket became clearly visible to everyone at the gate, including Captain Pearson, whose expression shifted from authoritative to uncertain in an instant. "Olivia, Elijah," Dr. Jackson said, embracing his children briefly before turning toward the gate counter. His voice was controlled, modulated to project authority without aggression. "What's happening here?" Karen, who had been busily scanning boarding passes, froze at the sound of his voice. She looked up to see a man in an official NASA jacket standing before her, the embroidered credentials unmistakable, even from her position. Captain Pearson stepped forward, then physically recoiled as he registered the patches on the jacket, particularly the Mars Sample Return Mission patch that he, as an aviation enthusiast, immediately recognized. Is that a NASA Advanced Propulsion Division jacket?" The captain's voice had lost its commanding tone, replaced by something closer to awe mixed with dawning horror. "Yes," Dr. Jackson confirmed, his gaze steady. "I'm Dr. Darius Jackson, Director of Advanced Propulsion Systems at NASA, and these," he gestured to Olivia and Elijah, "are my children, whom you've prevented from boarding their flight without valid cause." The captain's face drained of color as connections assembled in his mind. Dr. Jackson, the quantum efficiency protocol designer, the one who... His voice trailed off as he realized the full implications of who was standing before him. "Yes, Captain Pearson," Dr. Jackson replied, noting the name on the pilot's uniform. "The same Dr. Jackson whose propulsion efficiency algorithms power the engines on your aircraft. The same Dr. Jackson whose children you just accused of fraud." The shift in the room was palpable. Passengers who had been boarding paused to watch the confrontation. Mackenzie's live stream counter showed 186,000 viewers witnessing the encounter in real time, with comments flooding in too fast to read. Karen attempted to reassert control, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Sir, regardless of who you are, we have protocols." "Ms. Peterson," Dr. Jackson interrupted, reading her name tag. "Your protocols do not include discriminating against passengers based on race. Your protocols do not permit you to fabricate documentation concerns where none exist. And your protocols certainly do not authorize you to confiscate legitimate government-issued passports." He extended his hand, palm up. "I'll take my children's documents now." Karen hesitated, looking to Captain Pearson for support. The captain, however, was rapidly reassessing his position in light of who he was dealing with. He had attended a lecture by Dr. Jackson at the National Air and Space Museum just last month, where the scientist had unveiled quantum entanglement theories that could revolutionize air travel. "Ms. Peterson," Pearson said quietly, his voice now devoid of its previous authority, "please return the passenger's documentation immediately." With visible reluctance, Karen pushed the leather portfolio across the counter. Dr. Jackson opened it, verifying that all documents were present and undamaged. "Captain Pearson," Dr. Jackson continued, "the engines on your aircraft run on my designs. The fuel savings your airline has enjoyed for the past 18 months are a direct result of my research. I would think that would entitle my children to basic dignity and respect, but apparently that was too much to expect. Have you ever watched someone realize their prejudice was about to cost them everything? Have you seen that moment when arrogant certainty crumbles into dawning horror? That's what was happening on Captain Pearson's face as the full weight of his mistakes settled onto his shoulders. The implications of Dr. Jackson's words were not lost on anyone present. He wasn't just a concerned parent, he was a key contributor to Atlantic Skyway's operational efficiency, someone with tangible power in their industry. A new figure rushed toward the gate. Victoria Hayes, Atlantic Skyway's regional manager for JFK operations. At 39, she had climbed the corporate ladder through crisis management skills and political savvy. Her heels clicked rapidly against the terminal floor as she approached, having been alerted about the social media explosions surrounding Gate 27. "Dr. Jackson," she said breathlessly, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Hayes, regional manager for Atlantic Skyways. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Ms. Hayes," Dr. Jackson acknowledged without accepting the handshake. "There's been no misunderstanding. There has been documented, witness discrimination against my children, who were denied boarding without legitimate cause." Hayes shifted to damage control mode. "We take these allegations very seriously. I'd be happy to arrange immediate alternative transportation for your children. Our corporate win is available, or we can book them on the next flight with upgraded accommodations." "This isn't about alternative transportation," Dr. Jackson stated firmly. "This is about accountability." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Of course," Hayes nodded rapidly. "We'll conduct a full investigation and my children will board their original flight." Dr. Jackson interrupted. "The flight they have tickets for. The flight they have every legal right to be on." Hayes glanced at Captain Pearson, who nodded slightly. "Absolutely. We can arrange that immediately. And Ms. Peterson will be removed from her position at this gate." Jackson continued, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Karen's face flushed with indignation. "You can't just—" "Miss Peterson," Hayes cut her off sharply. "Please report to my office immediately." The power had shifted completely. What began as two teenagers being humiliated by authority figures had transformed into a public reckoning, witnessed by hundreds in person and hundreds of thousands online. "Dad," Olivia said quietly, touching her father's arm, "we need to board if we're going to make our presentation." Jackson nodded, his expression softening as he looked at his children. "You'll make it," he assured them, "and you'll be brilliant, as always." He turned back to Hayes. "My children will board now, but this situation is far from resolved." Hayes swallowed visibly. "Of course, Dr. Jackson, and I want to personally apologize for—" "This will be waiting when you land," he said to his children, ignoring Hayes entirely. As Olivia and Elijah were escorted to the jetway by a suddenly solicitous flight attendant, Dr. Jackson remained at the gate, watching to ensure they boarded safely. Captain Pearson lingered awkwardly, clearly wanting to say something but unable to find the words. "Captain Sparta," Jackson said finally, "I suggest you focus on flying my children safely to London. We'll discuss your role in this discrimination when you return." Pearson nodded stiffly and turned toward the cockpit, the weight of professional consequences heavy on his shoulders. His career, built over 30 years of flying, might very well end because of a snap judgment based on prejudice. Passengers who had witnessed the entire confrontation were now openly recording, many having recognized Dr. Jackson from media appearances or academic publications. Atlantic Skyways' stock would drop 11% before markets closed that day, a direct result of videos spreading across social platforms showing their employees discriminating against the children of one of America's most respected scientists. What began as a gate agent's prejudice was about to become an inflection point not just for an airline, but for an entire industry. Part 3, Immediate Aftermath. Flight 867, cleared for takeoff, runway 31L. The air traffic controller's voice crackled through the cockpit speakers as Captain Pearson completed his pre-takeoff checklist with mechanical precision, his movements automatic after thousands of similar procedures. But today his mind was elsewhere, specifically on the career-ending mistake he had just made at Gate 27. "Roger, cleared for takeoff, runway 31L, he responded, advancing the throttles. The engines designed with Dr. Darius Jackson's quantum efficiency protocols, spooled up with their characteristic low-pitched whine. In the first-class cabin, Olivia and Elijah Jackson sat in silence as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. The luxury surroundings that should have felt exciting now felt hollow, tainted by the humiliation they had endured to reach them. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked her brother quietly. Elijah nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "I just keep thinking about what would have happened if Dad hadn't shown up." How many other people go through this without anyone to advocate for them? The thought hung between them. How many travelers without a NASA director parent face similar discrimination with no recourse, no dramatic resolution, no justice? The flight attendants moved through the cabin with exaggerated courtesy, especially when serving the Jackson twins. Word had spread quickly among the crew about what happened at the gate and who these teenagers actually were. "Can I get you anything else before we reach cruising altitude?" a flight attendant asked, her smile strained with the effort of compensating for her colleague's behavior. "No, thank you," Olivia replied politely. Years of their father's guidance echoed in her mind. Your excellence is your best revenge. Your dignity under pressure is your greatest weapon. As Flight 867 climbed through 10,000 feet, Jackson stood at the terminal window, watching his children depart for a presentation he knew would change thousands of lives through their water purification technology. Pride mingled with simmering anger as he considered what had just transpired. His phone buzzed with a text from Robert Thompson. Atlantic Skyway's CEO Margaret Winter's office just called. They want to arrange a meeting. Dr. Jackson typed his reply. Good. They'll need one. 4:17 p.m. The social media storm reaches hurricane force. At Atlantic Skyway's headquarters in Chicago, the executive conference room had been hastily converted into a crisis management center. Large monitors displayed social media metrics, stock prices, and news coverage run, all trending in alarming directions. Margaret Winters, the 62-year-old CEO who had guided the airline through previous public relations challenges, stood at the head of the table reviewing the rapidly deteriorating situation. Her silver hair was cut in an expensive bob that framed a face accustomed to making difficult decisions. Today, her expression was grave as she addressed her executive team. What exactly happened at JFK, she demanded, directing her question to Bradley Wilson, the vice president of airport operations. Wilson cleared his throat uncomfortably. From what we've been able to piece together, a gate agent and Captain Pearson denied boarding to 2 teenage passengers despite valid documentation. And these weren't just any teenagers, added Samantha Doyle, chief marketing officer, scrolling through her tablet. Olivia and Elijah Jackson, 16-year-old twin scientific prodigies already accepted to MIT, winners of the Junior Nobel Prize for their water purification technology, children of Dr. Darius Jackson, director of advanced propulsion systems at NASA. The same Dr. Jackson who designed our fuel efficiency protocols, clarified Michael Rivera, chief technology officer, his expression pained. The ones saving us approximately $147 million annually in operational costs. Winters closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the magnitude of the mistake. And the gate agent's justification? Claim documentation concerns. Wilson replied, unable to meet her eyes. But the video evidence is problematic. Problematic, repeated Doyle with a humorless laugh. The live stream has been viewed 22 million times in the past 3 hours. Hashtag Atlantic Skyways. Shame is the #1 trending topic nationally. We've received statements of condemnation from 42 Nobel laureates, MIT, NASA, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the Congressional Black Caucus. The screens around the room displayed clips of the incident from multiple angles, each more damning than the last. Karen Peterson's dismissive tone, Captain Pearson's automatic backing of her discrimination, the twins' composed dignity in the face of humiliation, all captured and disseminated to millions of viewers worldwide. Winters turned to Jennifer Adams, general counsel for the airline. Legal exposure. Adams grimaced, adjusting her glasses nervously. Significant, clear violation of our own policies, potential civil rights implications. The discriminatory intent is difficult to dispute given the video evidence. Multiple recordings from different angles show our staff using coded language that courts have previously recognized as discriminatory. Options, Winters asked, her tone making it clear she expected solutions, not just problems. Standard playbook would be a public apology, financial offer, administrative leave for the employees involved pending investigation, Adams suggested, though her expression indicated she doubted this would suffice. Rivera shook his head. Dr. Jackson isn't going to be satisfied with the standard playbook. He has leverage beyond the typical customer. Our engines literally run on his intellectual property. The consulting contract for his efficiency protocols is up for renewal in 3 months. The room fell silent as the implications settled over the executive team. Atlantic Skyway's competitive edge in fuel efficiency, which translated to hundreds of millions in annual savings, was at risk. Draft the apology, Winters decided. Immediate termination for the gate agent, administrative leave for the captain pending review, offer compensation and a personal meeting with Dr. Jackson. Doyle tapped her tablet rapidly, already composing the public statement. Should we specify the amount of compensation? No, Winters replied. We'll negotiate that privately. What none of them realized was that Dr. Jackson had no interest in financial compensation. His strategic vision extended far beyond the typical resolution playbook. By 8:37 p.m., the video had been viewed 4.7 million times. Cable news networks had picked up the story, airing the confrontation with chyrons like discrimination at 30,000 feet and NASA scientist confronts airline discrimination. Social media engagement had expanded beyond traditional platforms, with aerospace engineers, scientists, and civil rights activists joining the conversation. The most damaging development, however, was the emergence of similar stories. As the Jackson twins' experience went viral, other passengers began sharing their own accounts of discrimination on Atlantic Skyway's flights. The hashtag Flying While Black collected hundreds of personal testimonials, creating a pattern too consistent to dismiss as isolated incidents. Atlantic Skyways issued their statement at 9:14 p.m. Atlantic Skyways acknowledges the incident at JFK Airport today involving 2 passengers who were initially denied boarding despite having valid documentation. We apologize for the actions of our staff, which do not reflect our company values or policies. The gate agent involved has been terminated, and Captain Pearson has been placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. We are reaching out to the passengers and their family directly to address this situation. Atlantic Skyways is committed to providing a respectful, inclusive environment for all travelers. The statement was immediately criticized as inadequate. Civil rights organizations pointed out the lack of concrete commitments to prevent similar incidents. Industry analysts noted the absence of any mention of Dr. Jackson's professional relationship with the airline. The stock price, which had closed down 11%, fell another 4% in after-hours trading. Social media reactions were swift and merciless. Too little, too late, Atlantic Skyways. This apology says nothing about systemic racism. Where's the accountability for the captain who backed this discrimination? Firing one gate agent doesn't fix your culture problem. Jackson should pull his engine technology and watch them go bankrupt. Dusha Jackson, meanwhile, declined all interview requests. His silence created an information vacuum that amplified speculation and prevented Atlantic Skyways from gauging his intentions. In London, Olivia and Elijah had landed and checked into their hotel. Despite the traumatic start to their journey, they were focused on their presentation the following morning. Their water purification system could potentially provide clean drinking water to communities affected by industrial pollution, a breakthrough that transcended the personal humiliation they had endured. Dad texted, Olivia told her brother as they prepared their demonstration materials. He says to focus on our presentation and let him handle everything else. Elijah nodded, adjusting the sonic resonance calibrator that formed the heart of their system. Do you think he's really going to sue them? Olivia considered the question. She knew her father well, his strategic mind, his preference for systematic change over individual punishment. No, she said finally. Dad doesn't think that way. He'll want something more substantial than money. She was right. Dr. Jackson was already assembling the evidence that would form the foundation of his approach, one that would transform not just Atlantic Skyways, but potentially the entire airline industry. Part 4, the strategic response. The NASA research facility hummed with quiet efficiency as Dr. Mark Jackson's team assembled in the secure conference room, typically reserved for propulsion system briefings. Today, they were focused on a different type of engineering problem, one involving human systems rather than mechanical ones. I've pulled the complaint data for the past 24 months, reported Dr. Rajiv Patel, a data analytics specialist who normally applied his skills to fuel consumption patterns. His screen displayed complex statistical visualizations. The pattern is statistically significant to a confidence interval of 9.7%. Jackson studied the numbers. his expression grave. 3,182 similar incidents documented through their customer service system. How many resulted in formal investigation? Less than 4%, Patel replied. And of those, only 0.5% resulted in any disciplinary action against employees. The evidence was damning. What had happened to Olivia and Elijah wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a systematic pattern of discrimination embedded in Atlantic Skyway's operational culture. The geographic distribution is particularly telling, added Dr. Martinez, highlighting clusters of incidents across the map. Highest concentration at their hubs in Dallas, Chicago, and New York, but present across all domestic and international routes. The chi-square analysis confirms this isn't random, it's systematic. Dr. Jackson nodded, absorbing the information. And the employee retention data, equally troubling, confirmed Dr. Layla Abrams, who had analyzed personnel records legally obtained through public filings. Atlantic Skyways has a 47% higher turnover rate among employees of color compared to white employees. Exit interviews cite cultural fit issues as the primary reason for departure. For 3 days, Dr. Jackson had declined all contact with the Atlantic Skyways executives while his team conducted this thorough analysis. His NASA colleagues had volunteered their expertise, applying the same rigorous methodology they used for spacecraft safety assessments to this investigation of corporate culture. What about their training protocols? Dr. Jackson asked. Dr. Martinez pulled up the relevant documents. Standard industry boilerplate, 2 hours of diversity training during onboarding, annual online refresher course with multiple choice test, no meaningful accountability mechanisms, no connection to performance evaluations or promotion criteria. Jackson stood, pacing the length of the conference room as he processed the information. His team watched, recognizing the intensity of his focus, the same concentration he applied to solving complex propulsion equations. They expect me to sue, he said finally. They're preparing for a financial settlement, maybe some publicity-friendly diversity initiative that disappears as soon as the news cycle moves on. That's the standard corporate response playbook, agreed Robert Thompson, who had joined the analysis team to provide legal context. Settle quickly, admit no wrongdoing, implement superficial changes, return to business as usual. Which is why we're not going to follow the expected script, Dr. Jackson decided. Turning to face his team, this isn't about monetary compensation. This is about fundamental transformation. He moved to the whiteboard and began outlining his approach, a comprehensive strategy designed not just to punish Atlantic Skyways, but to reshape their entire corporate structure. Phase 1 documentation and analysis. We've completed that, he said, writing on the board. Phase 2 strategic leverage. We use their dependence on my propulsion technology to force structural changes rather than symbolic gestures. He and his team watched intently as he detailed a plan that went far beyond anything Atlantic Skyways would be expecting. Meanwhile, at Atlantic Skyways headquarters, anxiety was mounting. 4 days had passed since the incident, and despite multiple attempts to contact him, Dr. Jackson remained silent. The company's stock had dropped 23% since the video went viral, wiping billions from their market capitalization. Cancellations were running 31% above normal rates. Corporate clients were pausing their contracts, citing concerns about associating their brands with the airline. CEO Margaret Winters convened an emergency meeting with her executive team and the board of directors. The atmosphere in the boardroom was tense, with several board members openly questioning the leadership team's handling of the crisis. It's been 4 days, noted William Blackwell, the longest-serving board member, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's perfect climate control. Every hour of silence from Dr. Jackson cost us millions in market value. What's being done to resolve this? We've made multiple attempts to establish contact, Winters replied, the strain evident in her voice. His attorney acknowledges our messages, but says Dr. Jackson will respond when he's ready. When he's ready, echoed Elizabeth Montgomery, another board member, her manicured fingernails tapping nervously on the polished table. We're hemorrhaging money while waiting for him to decide he's ready to talk to us. Dr. Jackson is in a uniquely powerful position, explained Michael Rivera, the CTO. Beyond the PR disaster, his quantum efficiency protocols are integrated into our entire fleet's engine management systems. If he declines to renew our licensing agreement, our operational costs would increase by approximately $147 million annually. The room fell silent as the board absorbed this information. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system and the occasional nervous shifting in leather chairs. We need to understand something fundamental. Winters continued. Dr. Jackson isn't just any passenger's parent. He's one of the most respected scientists in America, with deep connections throughout government, academia, and industry. His silence isn't random. It's strategic. As if on cue, her assistant entered the boardroom and handed her a note. Winters read it, her expression shifting from concern to cautious relief. Dr. Jackson's attorney just called. He's requesting a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. here at our headquarters, with me and the full board. Thank God. Blackwell sighed, visibly relaxing. Finally, we can negotiate a settlement and begin rebuilding. There's more, Winters continued, reading from the note. He specifically stated no attorneys are to be present, and he emphasized this isn't about a settlement. The request was unusual, bordering on unprecedented. Corporate negotiations typically involve layers of legal representatives, carefully worded statements, and protective protocols. No attorneys. That's irregular. Montgomery frowned. So is having your children publicly humiliated and discriminated against by a company that profits from your intellectual property, Rivera pointed out quietly. We don't have much choice, Winters concluded. We'll meet his conditions and hope he's coming with reasonable demands. 9 o'clock a.m. the following morning, the clock on the Atlantic Skyways headquarters lobby wall ticked precisely. The reception area had been meticulously arranged. Security briefed on treating the visitor with utmost respect. The boardroom prepared with refreshments and presentation capabilities. Board members arrived early, their usual confident demeanor replaced by an air of apprehension. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., Dr. Darius Jackson arrived, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with a subtle NASA pin on his lapel. He carried a single titanium briefcase, a stark contrast to the teams of attorneys and stacks of documents typically involved in high-stakes corporate negotiations. Dr. Jackson, Margaret Winters greeted him, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. I'm deeply sorry about what happened to your children. Ms. Winters, he acknowledged, accepting the handshake briefly. His expression revealed nothing of his intentions. I'm ready to meet with the board. Winters led him to the boardroom, where the 12 members of Atlantic Skyways Board of Directors waited. They rose as he entered, a show of respect that would have been unthinkable for most aggrieved customers. Dr. Jackson, Winters began once everyone was seated. Before we start, I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable treatment your children received. It violated our policies, our values, and basic human dignity. We take full responsibility and are committed to making this right. The speech sounded rehearsed, likely the product of multiple sessions with the PR team and legal department. It hit all the expected notes of corporate contrition without making specific commitments. Dr. Jackson listened silently, his expression unchanged. When Winters finished, he opened his briefcase and removed a single document. Ms. Winters, members of the board, he began, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. I appreciate the apology, but I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for transformation. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar in the context of what was expected to be a standard settlement negotiation. I'm not here to discuss compensation for my children, Dr. Jackson continued. I'm here because your company has a culture problem, one that extends far beyond a single gate agent or captain. He placed the document on the table. It contains statistical analyses, incident reports, personnel data, and customer complaints, all legally obtained through public records and witness testimonials. In the past 24 months, Atlantic Skyways has had 3,182 documented incidents similar to what happened to my children. Black and brown passengers reported for suspicious behavior at 4.7 times the rate of white passengers. Complaints about discriminatory treatment dismissed without investigation in 96% of cases. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Dr. Jackson methodically presented the evidence. Several shifted in their seats, ties suddenly feeling too tight, jacket collars too constricting. This isn't about one gate agent making a bad decision, he continued. This is about systemic failure, a culture that enables, excuses, and effectively endorses discriminatory behavior. Dr. Jackson, interrupted William Blackwell, tugging at his collar as sweat beaded on his forehead. While we take these allegations seriously, these aren't allegations, Dr. Jackson corrected firmly. These are documented facts derived from your own records, and they demonstrate a pattern of discrimination that requires more than a termination and a press release to address. He turned to CEO Winters. You're not here to apologize. You're here because your company is bleeding out, and you believe I hold a tourniquet. You're correct, but my price for stopping the bleeding is not financial restitution. My price is transformation. One from his briefcase. He removed a sleek titanium case and slid it across the table. It stopped perfectly in front of Winters, the soft sound of metal against wood unnaturally loud in the tense silence. My terms are not negotiable, he stated, with trembling hands. Winters opened the case. Inside was a document titled The Jackson Protocol for Equitable Aviation. First, Dr. Jackson explained as if narrating a verdict. Atlantic Skyways will capitalize a Justice and Dignity Fund with an immediate payment of $150 million. This fund will not be administered by you or by me. It will be managed by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, with the sole purpose of compensating individuals with credible claims of discrimination against any airline and funding aggressive litigation to challenge discriminatory practices across the entire industry. The board members stared in shock at the magnitude of the demand. My children had me, Dr. Jackson continued. This fund will be for everyone who does not. He gestured for Winters to turn to the next page. Second, accountability is set at the top. Your board has demonstrated profound blindness to the culture it oversees. Therefore, you will cede 2 seats on your board of directors in perpetuity to appointees selected by the Jackson Foundation. The first will be a leading constitutional law professor specializing in civil rights. The second will be a distinguished sociologist whose life's work is the study of systemic bias. This was unprecedented, a permanent restructuring of corporate governance forced by a single incident. Your company will be given new eyes, Dr. Jackson stated. You will learn to see what you have for so long chosen to ignore. Elizabeth Montgomery found her voice. Dr. Jackson, while we understand your concerns, surrendering control of board seats is not negotiable, he finished for her. As I stated at the outset, he continued, his tone unwavering. Third, you will scrap every diversity, sensitivity, and customer service training program you currently have. They are performative failures. You will replace them with a new curriculum, the Jackson Protocol, which will be designed by my handpicked team of experts. Every single one of your 70,000 employees, from the baggage handlers to you, Ms. Winters, will be required to pass a rigorous certification course under this new standard. Failure to pass will be grounds for immediate termination. The scope of the demand was staggering, a complete overhaul of the company's training infrastructure, affecting every employee across all levels. Your airline will become the gold standard for equitable service, Dr. Jackson declared. Whether it wants to or not, the final page of the document was titled Partnership and Progress. This was the section the board had been waiting for, the part addressing the quantum efficiency protocol licensing agreement that saved the airline millions annually. And finally, Jackson said, a glint of steel in his eyes. The Jackson Aerospace Consulting contract. It will be reinstated. The operational chaos will end. However, the new licensing fee will be triple the original rate, $450 million per year. Michael Rivera gasped audibly. Dr. Jackson, with all due respect, that is punitive. We're already facing financial challenges. An additional $300 million expenditure it is not a penalty. Dr. Jackson interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. It is an investment in your redemption. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Your gate agent looked at 2 of the world's most promising young scientists and saw a threat, a problem, a profile that didn't belong. Your company will now pay to create a world where that can never happen again. He turned back to face the stunned board. The additional $300 million will not come to my company. It will be paid annually and directly into a new foundation I am announcing today. This money will fund the Jackson Initiative for Equitable Innovation. It will provide full STEM scholarships, mentorships, and leadership training for thousands of underprivileged young people of color every year. The audacity of his plan left the board speechless. He wasn't just demanding money or control, he was demanding a soul. He was hijacking their entire corporate identity and rebranding them as an engine of social justice, powered by the profits of their own past sins. You will not just be a client, Dr. B. Jackson concluded. You will be our founding partner. Your logo will be on every scholarship award. Your penance will be to publicly champion the very people you privately scorned. The room fell into stunned silence. This was not a negotiation, it was a transformation mandate. Margaret Winters looked at the board members, who stared back with expressions ranging from disbelief to resignation. The math was brutally simple: reject these terms and face bankruptcy from the combination of public backlash and increased operational costs, or accept and fundamentally reinvent the company. We need time to discuss this, she managed finally. You have 1 hour, Dr. Jackson replied, checking his watch. I'll wait in your reception area. As he left the boardroom, the executives exchanged shell-shocked glances. This is extortion, Blackwell muttered once the door closed. No, Rivera countered, reviewing the proposal. It's brilliant. He's not taking a dime for himself or his children. He's forcing us to become the company we've always claimed to be in our mission statements. Can we afford this? Montgomery asked, directing her question to the CFO. Can we afford not to? He replied grimly. Our stock has dropped 27% in 4 days. Bookings are down 31%. If Dr. Jackson goes public with his research on our discriminatory patterns, we're looking at potential class action lawsuits that could cost billions. Winters massaged her temples, feeling the weight of the decision before them. He's offering us a path forward, an expensive one, but a path nonetheless. It would fundamentally change who we are as a company, Blackwell argued. Perhaps, Winters nodded. That's exactly what we need. After 57 minutes of heated debate, the board reached their decision. Dr. Jackson was invited back into the boardroom. We accept your terms, Winters announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was agreeing to. Dr. Jackson nodded once, betraying no emotion. The attorneys will draw up the formal agreements. I expect the Justice and Dignity Fund to be capitalized within 30 days. The board appointments will be made within 60 days. The training protocol implementation will begin immediately, and the first Jackson Initiative scholarships will be awarded before the next academic year. Understood, Winters confirmed. As Dr. Jackson gathered his materials to leave, he paused at the door. My children presented their water purification system at the summit yesterday. It was selected for implementation in 32 developing countries, potentially providing clean water to millions of people. The statement hung in the air, a reminder of who these executives had allowed to be humiliated at their gate. They succeeded despite what your company did to them. Dr. Jackson continued. Imagine what they might have accomplished without that barrier. Now multiply that by thousands of young people who face similar discrimination every day without a parent who can force accountability. He left without waiting for a response, leaving behind a boardroom of executives confronting not just a corporate crisis but a moral one. Part 5, the demands and resolution. 2 weeks later, the world's media gathered in the grand ballroom of the Horizon Hotel in Chicago. Reporters from major networks jostled for position, cameras ready to capture what had been billed as a transformative announcement in aviation history. On stage, a podium displayed both the Atlantic Skyways logo and a new insignia, the Jackson Initiative for Equitable Innovation, represented by a stylized globe intersected by upward-reaching lines that suggested both flight paths and progress. At precisely 10 o'clock a.m., Dr. Darius Jackson stepped onto the stage, followed by Margaret Winters and the Atlantic Skyways Board of Directors. The executive's body language told its own story, a mixture of resignation and cautious optimism, like prisoners who had accepted their sentence and were now determined to make the best of it. Dr. Jackson approached the microphone first, his presence commanding immediate silence from the assembled press. Good morning, he began. 2 weeks ago, my children, Olivia and Elijah Jackson, were denied boarding on an Atlantic Skyways flight despite having valid documentation and tickets. They were profiled, humiliated, and discriminated against because of their race. The bluntness of his opening statement sent a ripple through the audience. Corporate press conferences typically began with carefully worded euphemisms, not stark acknowledgments of discrimination. What happened to them was not an isolated incident, Dr. Jackson continued. It was a symptom of a systemic problem, one that affects thousands of travelers every year across multiple airlines. He gestured to a large screen behind him, which displayed statistical analyses of discriminatory incidents in air travel. The data was damning: clear patterns of bias in security screenings, boarding procedures, in-flight service, and complaint resolution. In the past 24 months alone, Atlantic Skyways has had 3,182 documented incidents similar to what happened to my children, he stated, the precise number echoing through the ballroom. Black and brown passengers were reported for suspicious behavior at 4 or 7 times the rate of white passengers. Complaints about discriminatory treatment were dismissed without investigation in 96% of cases. Journalists frantically took notes, recognizing that they were being handed a story far larger than a single incident of discrimination. Today, I'm not here to announce a lawsuit, Dr. Jackson clarified. I'm here to announce a transformation. He outlined the comprehensive agreement reached with the Atlantic Skyways, the $150 million Justice and Dignity Fund, the permanent board seats reserved for civil rights experts, the complete overhaul of training procedures, and the creation of the Jackson Initiative for Equitable Innovation, funded by the increased licensing fees for his propulsion technology. This isn't about punishing one company for one incident, he emphasized. This is about creating lasting change that extends beyond a single airline or a single family's experience. When Dr. Jackson finished his portion of the presentation, he invited Margaret Winters to the podium. The CEO approached with visible humility, a stark contrast to her typically commanding presence in corporate settings. What happened to Olivia and Elijah Jackson was inexcusable, she began, her voice steady despite the difficulty of the moment. As CEO of Atlantic Skyways, I take full responsibility for the culture that allowed such discrimination to occur. Our response cannot be limited to terminating the employees involved or issuing an apology. Real accountability requires real change. She detailed Atlantic Skyways' commitment to implementing every aspect of the Jackson Protocol, acknowledging that it would fundamentally reshape the company's operations, training, and corporate identity. This isn't just about avoiding future incidents, Winters stated. It's about becoming the company we should have been all along, one that truly values every passenger, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The press conference continued with presentations from civil rights leaders, education advocates, and industry experts who would be involved in implementing various aspects of the agreement. The comprehensive nature of the plan became increasingly clear. This wasn't a typical corporate damage control exercise, but a template for industry-wide transformation. As the event concluded, reporters shouted questions about the financial impact on Atlantic Skyways, the precedent this set for other discrimination cases, and whether Dr. Jackson believed other airlines would follow suit voluntarily. The most expensive option is always to continue discriminating. Dr. Jackson replied to the financial question. Atlantic Skyways is making an investment in becoming better, not just morally, but operationally. Studies consistently show that diverse, equitable organizations outperform their biased counterparts in every metric that matters. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Olivia and Elijah Jackson were completing their final presentation at the International Youth Innovation Summit in London. Their water purification system had been the standout technology of the conference, with implementation agreements already signed with development agencies working in 32 countries across Africa, Asia, and South America. As they concluded their demonstration, showing how a device the size of a microwave could purify enough water for a village of 500 people using minimal energy, the audience erupted in a standing ovation. Among the crowd were representatives from the world's leading scientific institutions, humanitarian organizations, and technology firms. We developed this technology because access to clean water is a fundamental human right, Olivia explained during the Q&A session. No child should have to walk miles for water that might make them sick. No community should have to choose between dehydration and disease. When asked about the incident that had made international headlines, Elijah responded with remarkable grace. What happened to us at that airport gate was unfortunate, but it's already leading to positive change. Our father always taught us that the true measure of any setback is the progress that comes from addressing it properly. Their maturity and perspective impressed the audience even more than their technical achievement. At 16, they displayed a wisdom about systemic change that many executives 3 times their age struggled to grasp. Back in Chicago, the implementation of the Jackson Protocol began immediately. The first action was a company-wide stand-down, a 24-hour pause in non-essential operations to allow every employee to participate in an introductory session on the new approach to equitable service. Karen Peterson, the gate agent whose discrimination had triggered the entire situation, had been terminated within hours of the incident. Captain William Pearson had been placed on unpaid administrative leave, required to complete 200 hours of community service with STEM programs serving underprivileged youth before being considered for reinstatement in a non-command position. The Justice and Dignity Fund was officially established, with its first action being a comprehensive audit of discrimination complaints across all major airlines. The results would provide a baseline for measuring improvement and identifying which carriers required the most immediate intervention. Most significantly, the 2 new board seats at Atlantic Skyways were filled within the promised 60-day timeframe. Dr. Chiyaro Amara Johnson, a constitutional law professor specializing in civil rights legislation, and Dr. Marcus Rivera, a sociologist whose research focused on institutional bias in transportation systems, joined the board with full voting rights and oversight responsibilities. Their first board meeting was a culture shock for the existing members. Rather than focusing primarily on financial metrics, the new directors asked penetrating questions about employee demographics, complaint resolution procedures, and how frontline staff were evaluated and promoted. I noticed that while 47% of your ground staff are people of color, only 12% of your management team reflects that diversity, Chidurpaya Johnson observed, reviewing the personnel data. What structural barriers are preventing advancement? The question created visible discomfort among the executives, who were unaccustomed to such direct challenges to their hiring and promotion practices. And I see that customer satisfaction scores are tracked by route and class of service, but not by passenger demographics, Dr. Rivera noted. Without that data, how can you identify potential service disparities? These questions represented exactly what Dr. Jackson had intended with the board appointments, new perspectives that would force the company to confront its blind spots and address systemic issues that had long been ignored. Within 90 days of the agreement, the first phase of the Jackson Protocol training had been rolled out to all customer-facing employees. Unlike the previous perfunctory diversity training, this program was immersive, challenging, and directly connected to job performance evaluations. Flight attendants participated in scenario-based learning that required them to identify and address biased behavior, both in themselves and their colleagues. Gate agents underwent rigorous testing on documentation procedures, ensuring that requirements were applied consistently across all passenger demographics. Pilots received specialized training on how their authority as captains carried additional responsibility to prevent discrimination rather than reinforce it. The most visible change, however, was in Atlantic Skyways' public identity. Their advertising, which had previously featured predominantly white business travelers and families, was completely revamped to reflect the diversity of their actual passenger base. Their website prominently displayed their commitment to the Jackson Protocol and provided transparent reporting on discrimination complaints and resolution outcomes. 6 months after the incident at JFK, the transformation of Atlantic Skyways had progressed from corporate mandate to measurable reality. Discrimination incidents had decreased by 82%. Customer satisfaction scores had increased across all demographic groups, and employee retention had improved, particularly among staff of color. The financial results were equally impressive. After the initial stock drop, Atlantic Skyways' share price had recovered and then surpassed its pre-incident level, up 18% as investors recognized the business benefits of improved reputation and customer loyalty. Most importantly, the first class of Jackson Initiative scholars had been selected. 1,000 promising young scientists of color who would receive full scholarships to pursue STEM education, with mentorship from leading researchers, including Dr. Jackson himself. The day the scholarships were announced, Olivia and Elijah Jackson participated in the selection committee's final meeting, reviewing applications from students whose brilliance might otherwise have gone unrecognized. It's strange to think that what happened to us at that gate led to all of this, Olivia reflected as they reviewed the accomplishments of the scholarship finalists. Dad always says that systems only change when they're forced to, Elijah replied. He turned our humiliation into an opportunity to create something lasting. Their father's strategic vision had transformed what could have been a simple discrimination lawsuit into a comprehensive reform that would benefit thousands of travelers and aspiring scientists for generations to come. Part 6, The Impact. 6 months had passed since Dr. Darius Jackson stood in the Atlantic Skyways boardroom and demanded transformation rather than compensation. The changes that followed had exceeded even the most optimistic projections, creating ripple effects throughout the aviation industry and beyond. The most striking statistics came from Atlantic Skyways itself. Discrimination incidents had decreased by 82%, a drop so significant that industry analysts initially questioned the methodology until independent auditors verified the results. Customer complaints related to biased treatment had fallen by 77%, while overall customer satisfaction scores had increased by 23% across all demographic groups. The implementation of the Jackson Protocol training had transformed the company's culture from within. Every employee, from baggage handlers to the CEO, had completed the intensive certification program that challenged them to recognize and address biases in themselves and their colleagues. Those who resisted or failed to meet the standards, approximately 7% of the workforce, had been dismissed, creating space for new employees who embraced the equitable service model. Atlantic Skyways board diversity now stood at 47%, the highest in the industry, with the 2 permanent seats held by civil rights experts providing consistent accountability at the highest level of corporate governance. Former CEO Marguerite Winters had stepped down 3 months after the agreement, acknowledging that new leadership was needed to fully embody the transformed company vision. She had since accepted a position teaching corporate ethics at Harvard Business School, using Atlantic Skyways as a case study in corporate transformation. Perhaps most significantly, the first class of 1,000 Jackson Initiative scholars had been selected from a pool of 27,000 applicants. These promising young scientists of color would receive full STEM scholarships, along with mentorship, internship opportunities, and guaranteed interviews at leading research institutions upon graduation. The financial impact on Atlantic Skyways had defied conventional expectations. After the initial 27% stock drop following the incident, the airline's shares had not only recovered, but increased 18% from their pre-incident levels. Market analysts attributed this to improved customer loyalty, reduced litigation costs, and a reputation premium that attracted socially conscious travelers and corporate clients. What Atlantic Skyways has demonstrated, wrote the Wall Street Journal in an analysis piece, is that equity and profitability are not competing goals but complementary ones. Their transformation under the Jackson Protocol has created measurable financial advantages while addressing long-standing ethical concerns. The ripple effects extended far beyond one airline. Within the industry, 8 major carriers had voluntarily adopted versions of the Jackson Protocol, recognizing the competitive advantage of being perceived as equitable service providers. The Justice and Dignity Fund had initiated proceedings against 3 airlines with particularly egregious discrimination patterns, creating powerful incentives for proactive reform. Captain William Pearson's journey had been particularly noteworthy. After completing his 200 hours of community service with the Bronx Science Initiative, he had requested additional volunteer time. The experience of working with brilliant young students of color had fundamentally changed his perspective. Though he would never again serve as captain, he had found a new role in Atlantic Skyways Training Division, where he now helped other pilots recognize how their authority could be used to prevent discrimination rather than enable it. I made a split-second judgment based on bias, not facts, Pearson admitted during a training session for new pilots. In that moment, I forgot that my responsibility as captain extends beyond the aircraft itself to the dignity of every passenger. Karen Peterson had initially resisted her termination, filing wrongful dismissal claims that were quickly dismissed given the overwhelming video evidence. After months of unsuccessful job hunting, she had accepted a position with a community center teaching basic computer skills to underprivileged youth. The irony of her new role was not lost on anyone familiar with her story. Working with these kids has shown me how wrong my assumptions were, she confided to a colleague. Some of my students are more brilliant with technology than I'll ever be, but they've been held back by the same prejudices I used to enforce. For Olivia and Elijah Jackson, life had continued its remarkable trajectory. Their water purification system was being implemented in 32 developing countries, with preliminary data showing significant health improvements in communities where the technology had been deployed. They had begun their freshman year at MIT, where they were already conducting advanced research while mentoring younger students from underrepresented backgrounds. On a crisp autumn morning by my daughter, Darius Jackson gave a rare television interview, reflecting on the transformation his children's humiliation had sparked. This was never about punishment, he explained, seated in his NASA office with models of the propulsion systems he had designed visible in the background. It was about progress. What happened to Olivia and Elijah was painful, but we refused to let that pain be wasted. We insisted that it become the catalyst for meaningful change. The interviewer asked whether he believed the Jackson Protocol could be applied to other industries where discrimination remained a persistent problem. The principles are universal. Dr. Jackson nodded. Accountability at the highest levels of leadership, rigorous, consequential training rather than performative workshops, transparency in reporting and addressing incidents, and perhaps most importantly, creating direct investment in developing the talent that bias causes us to overlook or exclude. He leaned forward, his expression intensifying. The most tragic aspect of discrimination isn't the pain it causes, though that pain is real and significant. The true tragedy is the potential it wastes. How many brilliant minds, how many world-changing innovations, how many solutions to our most pressing problems have we lost because we judged people by their appearance rather than their abilities? As the interview concluded, the camera cut to footage of Olivia and Elijah working with the first class of Jackson Initiative scholars, young people whose intellect and creativity might previously have been overlooked or undervalued. The scene powerfully illustrated Dr. Jackson's point about wasted potential and the importance of creating pathways for talent to flourish, regardless of race or background. The transformation that began with a humiliating incident at an airport gate had grown into something far more significant, a template for turning discrimination into opportunity, prejudice into progress, and individual injustice into systematic improvement. Have you witnessed discrimination that needs addressing? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could help identify patterns that require intervention and accountability. If you work in an industry where similar bias occurs, what changes could create more equitable systems? Tag 3 people who should see this video, especially those in positions to create institutional change in their organizations. Subscribe to Blacktail Stories for more accounts of dignity preserved, justice achieved, and systems transformed. Hit that like button if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who needs to understand the power of strategic accountability. Remember that the next generation is watching how we respond to injustice today.